was like one day I was doing a certain type of mission where it's like you're flying in a two ship against like another two ship, and it's like air combat maneuvering. And so one of the two formations will merge and they'll start flying. And it's hard when it's two F-16s, so you have to keep track of who's who. It's better when you're doing it dissimilar against, like an Eagle or a Hornet or whatever, because then you can tell, who you're shooting at. But I had, I knew who my flight lead was, and we did this merge, and I had a helmet mounted cueing system, and I locked him and I shot him, and my radar had transitioned back from the bad guy to the good guy. So I killed my flight lead, and I was like, oh. So again, here I am, this like Thunderbird, the only chick going through training, told this guy to stop telling me how to fly formation because I knew what I was doing. And then I accidentally
blue on blue.
Yep. Killed my own good guy. So, I never made that mistake again after that. And I never made it before in 1,500 hours of flying, but it stinks. But I guess, the perspective is no matter how far you are in training or what you're doing, you can always make mistakes, and you just have to own up to it and address it like face to face. You don't have to pretend like it didn't happen or be embarrassed about it.
All Fire, No Smoke is our candid conversation as two military aviators sharing the unique experiences we've had in combat, reconnaissance, and demonstration flying.
Through personal stories, technical details, and laughter, we explore the challenges of balancing leadership, motherhood, professional life, all while offering inspiring insights for those who are trying to strike that work-life balance.
I'm Merrill Tangestal, retired Air Force Colonel. You guys might know me as the Dragon Lady. I flew the SH-60 helicopter in the Navy before switching over to the Air Force and becoming the first and only black woman to fly the U-2 spy plane. My last job was at the Pentagon, where I was the Director of Inspection for the Inspector General.
I'm retired Lieutenant Colonel Caroline Jensen. I go by the call sign Blaze. I flew the F-16 Fighting Falcon, better known as the Viper, in the Air Force during Operation Iraqi Freedom, and was later selected as the first female reserve officer to fly with the prestigious United States Air Force Air Demonstration Squadron, known as the Thunderbirds. My son also happened to be the first kid to ever get to watch his mom fly with an advanced jet demo team.
What was a time that is most memorable for you where you were like, dude, this is some bull.
Yeah.
I'm about to be out, but that stupid goal is right here on the back of my, nagging me.
Yeah. So I think back to pilot training, and I always had wanted to be a fighter pilot, but there were so few slots in my pilot training class. So I wasn't really sure I was going to get one. And then I think I kind of walked back my dream a little bit just in case I didn't pass. Then I wouldn't have to worry about failing because I didn't, really want it anymore anyway. And
what was your second choice if you didn't get it?
Anything. I don't know. I mean, flying airplanes in the Air Force is awesome. Get to see the world and, meet cool people, be in a squadron. So when I was in pilot training, they had a C5 guy come and talk to us. And he talked about riding camels in Egypt and all the 5-star hotels they stayed in and stuff like that.
Must be nice.
Yeah. And then we had the A10 guy came in to give us, so this was in the basic screening, and then you get to pick which track you're going to go to. And the A10 guy came in. He's a very handsome, he looked like a walking Ken doll, but he was just had personality of plastic that day. And he had these slides back in the day, or the really film slides that they would put on the overhead projector.
Yeah.
But they were really slippery. So he wanted to put these slides on the overhead projector, and they went whoosh, all over the floor. And he's like, you know what? If you don't already effing know you want to fly an effing fighter, then I don't need to talk to you guys anyway. And I was like, well, shoot, maybe I don't. Because the C5 guy was so excited about riding camels and staying in nice hotels, and the A10 guy was, I think he told me he slept on the hood of a Humvee once, and then he woke up with a bullet hole next to him or something crazy. So it's well, I don't know what I really want to do. And the squadron commander and the squadron second in command both heard about it, and they were both F-16 pilots. And because a lot of people were swayed by the attitude of the guy who was talking to us about the fighters.
Yes.
And he ended up, they both the commander and the director of operations, what they call it in the Air Force, they came in and talked about how awesome the F-16 was and how, it's like fly by wire and how silent it is, how strong it is, and all that was great. So I had done well on my first 2 check rides, and I was like, well, if I do great on my formation check ride, then I'll put fighters down. And I probably didn't bomb it, but to me, I bombed it. And I'd flown with the same formation partner, and he was doing a straight ahead rejoin, and we were running out to the end of the airspace. And I had to stay straight and level till he rejoined, and something had happened. And I ended up popping out the back of the airspace by like half a mile, I think. Yeah, which is like automatic bust, but
Yeah, that's a bust.
But they ended up maybe calling it a momentary deviation. Everything else went really great. So I think they gave me a couple other downgrades instead of hooking me, like failing me on the check ride. And then I ended up getting fighters anyway. So I'd kind of like given up on it. And it was just this like, I put way too much pressure on one event and then kind of worked my way through it. And then my like last check ride, I got like a 1 downgrade excellent, which was like a really, really good score. So everything worked out, but I don't know. I think it's in my mind when I go back. I'm always very hard on myself, and I probably almost failed it, and I probably did, like way better. I've done that with other grade sheets. There was a ride in the Thunderbirds where I was like, man, I almost failed that thing. And I look at my grade sheet and it was like above average. Like, oh, okay, well, that's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
So what about you? Is there a moment where you're like, I don't know if this is for me, or I screwed that up, I ruined my chances?
To fly? No. When I decided to go Navy, it was finding a recruiter, which was very difficult. In New York City, what I didn't know at the time, in the Navy, they have Navy recruiters for enlisted folks and then recruiting districts for officers. So I was talking to a lot of recruiters for enlisted, and they're like, "Nah, we don't have any pilot slots. We don't have any pilot slots." And I was like, "Damn, I'm just got my degree, coming out of the gate, and people like, there's no pilot slots." But yet, I knew the Navy was looking for pilots. Like everyone was. I felt like I wasn't the strongest engineering student, but I felt like I was a hot commodity. Like I'm technical background. I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. I have electrical engineering in high school, and I did some research. Like I should be wanted. And so the guy I was dating at the time was a Navy corpsman, and he was at station at Yuma, Marine Corps Air Station, Yuma, Arizona. And he had talked to a recruiter in San Diego. And it was a recruiting district. And so he was like, give him a call. And I was like, all right. So I gave him a call. And they were like, what's your degree? What's all this stuff? And you could tell the recruiter was kind of salivating.
Yeah, I was going to say chomping at the bit.
Yeah, it was like, if you could get out here and take the test and pass, we'll get you a pilot slot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, say less. So, because it was very frustrating. Like the first 6 months after graduating college, like I'm trying to do all these things. I said, well, screw it. I wasn't going to join the Navy. I was going to join the Army. And I was going to do the Warrant Officer program. And they're like, oh, you have to take the ASVAB. I'm like, why? I got a degree.
Yeah.
Like, take the ASVAB. And I got 96, 98, something ridiculous. And so they were going to sign me up. But then this recruiting thing happened because I was like, well, you're not going to thwart. I'll just fly helicopters.
Yeah.
And I took a 5-day bus trip from New York to Yuma, Arizona. And then I went back over to San Diego like the next day, took the test, did well, passed it, because they could grade it there. And then they were like, let's get your paperwork. And I'm like, sweet.
Yeah.
I just had to wait. I waited 6 months, and I got picked up. I started working downtown, Macmillan Publishing Company in Manhattan. Don't recommend that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then I got picked up. So, there's a point where I could have quit and said, no, I don't want to go to the Navy. I'd rather go to the Army. do the warrant officer. I was going to swear in to the warrant officer program.
Wow.
And I was like, no.
When I got selected for the T-38, which was the fighter bomber track, we had to go do a familiarization ride in the centrifuge. Have you ever had to do the centrifuge?
No. In the Navy, we did like a centrifuge, but it's not. At that time, it wasn't to the extent of what the Air Force did. And then when I went to when I was in the Air Force and I was going to the physiological officer course, they made the other students do the centrifuge, and they were like, "Hey, ma'am, you want to do it?" And I'm like, "No, I already did it."
Yes.
I was like, I was not even in the mood. I was like,
Yeah.
"You're not putting me to 9Gs or 7Gs. Like, I can't." Like,
It's hell on earth.
Well, I could. Like, the T6 was a 7G aircraft. So I was like, yeah, 7Gs, 9Gs. I don't give a crap. I was like, no.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing this nonsense.
No, it's hellacious. And I used to always say, like, if I don't live a good life and I go to hell, I'm just going to be spinning in the centrifuge for eternity, because it was so miserable. And there were 2 different centrifuges, and one of them had like a shorter arm, which meant more like revolutions per minute. And I literally got out of the centrifuge one day and was like leaning over, and I could not like lift my head up because there was like so much tumbling effect for like almost a half an hour after it was over. But for familiarization, they would make us go, and you had to pull up to 7Gs, and they would do like a profile. They give you academics to teach you like how to do it at first. And then they gave us a profile that was like, you had to go up to so many Gs without your G suit inflating. And then they would add it. And then it was like 5.5. And the big G was 7.5 Gs. And so that was towards the end. And it was a small group of us, like 5, 6 of us in there.
Inflated or not inflated?
We'd be wearing it, and it would not inflate for like the first set, and then it would inflate. So the G suit, when you get about 2 Gs, it starts to inflate.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
So you have that assistance from the suit for the 7.5 Gs. And I got there, and they have these lights up in front of you, and you're staring at them, and you can tell when people start to like go out because their eyes get like really big. And and they want to know how much light loss you have, and there's like lights that start on the outside, and they get to, I think it was red in the middle. So, and then like, how much light loss did you have? And people are like, oh, no light loss, but you can tell because their eyes are like saucers that they probably saw the middle one or like nothing. And so I did the first 7G spin, and all the lights went out. And I think I even like closed my eyes for a little bit, but I could still hear them. And I hit the amount of time I was supposed to pull 7Gs, and you have to make sure you keep straining because a lot of people like let go, and then they, even though it's spinning down, that's still above their threshold, so you can G-lock like after you've finished it. So I'm like, eyes get really big, eyes kind of close. I can still hear them, and I let go. I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, ma'am, we're going to need to see that one again.
No. See, I didn't want to deal with that nonsense.
No, it was terrible. Well, then they spin me again, and I go up to 7, and this time it's lights out for Blaze, right? Like, it was the best nap I've ever taken. It was like
the best 20 seconds.
It wasn't even that long. And it's funny because they say like a lot of people when they G-lock, they do the funky chicken, and when they wake up, it's like their head shakes and their arms are shaking. And I just like, my hair was really short. My hair flapped forward in my face. I was like leaning down. They're like, ma'am, are you okay? And I just kind of like sat up and like brushed my hair out of my face. But it was, I don't know, 5 seconds, something like that. I dreamt that I was at this like beautiful green lawn, and there was like a picnic table there, and there was like a music box with like a little dancer and this like music and like bright colored balloons. And I was like just so refreshed. It was a beautiful little nap that lasted. And they're like, yeah, we're going to have to see that again. I'm like, okay, great. So then I spun again.
3 times.
3 times, and it looked a lot like the first time. So I didn't G-lock, but I definitely had light loss to like nothing. So fast forward, so it was familiarization only. I could go into the T-38, which was I don't even remember, 7.5G airplane.
When I flew it was 5.
No, it was for sure, because that's why we went up to 7.5. So
maybe it was 5 for
yeah.
Oh, maybe it was. For some reason, I thought we were limited to 5, but it could have been because of the airframe.
Yeah, if you had something hanging on it, I don't know.
No, we didn't have
Okay.
But I've flown the A model, B, and C model. So when I went to Palmdale, I flew the B's and C's.
Yeah.
But Yeah, maybe it was
Yeah.
7G. It was 7Gs in the T6.
Yeah.
So that's why I was not interested in doing centrifuge. I'm like, dude, I pulled 7Gs a lot. I like that.
Yeah. Well, so then like I pass, or I don't pass, but I'm familiarized. And the good news is that G's are way easier to pull. I mean, they can still get you, but it's a lot easier to pull G's in an airplane than it is in this like centrifuge that's like whipping you around the room. But when I got my assignment after having been an instructor, I got the 9G single seat, single engine fighting machine, the F-16. I was like, oh, like it was so great to get it, but I was so worried about it. And I tried to harness that failure that I had, way back when. And I just worked out legs like 3 days a week to failure, like, a couple different exercises of 6 to 8 reps to failure, 3 sets. I, drank all the water I could, got there a day early, made sure that I slept. And for the Viper centrifuge, they let the seat is tilted back like 30 degrees, like the F-16 seat, Viper seat is tilted back. So that helps you a little bit. And they make you pull, I think it's like up to 8 Gs without a G suit, which was like really bad. And things started closing in. And I was starting to kind of get there, and they're like, all right, hang on, ma'am. And I almost let go. They're like, you're almost there, ma'am. So I held on. And then they said it was done. And I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, all right, good job. And I was like, really? Okay, great. And we went on. And I did so good on the next ones. They were like, we want to use your tape to train other people. So I
That's awesome.
was able to harness that failure. And it was a lot of stress. Like it was such a wonderful thing to get the airplane that I did, the F-16. I love it. But in the back of my mind, like nagging me for months and months and months, was like, man, you better pass that stinking centrifuge. So that's how I harnessed that failure. Yeah, it's crazy. You are tumbling when you get out of that. Just your head vestibular system is going like crazy when you get out.
Yes, yeah, I wanted none of that. Like don't get me wrong, I love tumbling. I love being in an aircraft.
Yeah.
I love pulling G's. I love going over the top. It's like to me, a roller coaster ride that you have control over. But to go in the centrifuge in the sterile environment and pull G's to just, hey, let's see how far you can go. I was like,
Yeah.
no, why?
Yeah.
I'm there.
It's like,
Now, if it was 9Gs, that would have been cool.
yeah.
I've done 7. That's it.
It's all right.
Are you good? Are you good?
9 was okay.
You're fine
I
now.
don't need to do that again.
Did you do it actually in the aircraft?
Oh yeah, we pulled 9Gs in the airplane. But a lot of times if you had like a targeting pod, or if you had wing tanks, and or a centerline tank, and depending on how much fuel was left in the tanks, or what the armament was, you were still limited to, it could be 5.5 Gs, 7 Gs, like a certain Mach number too.
So well, let me before you do that, dive in harnessing failure. Like, what would you do? Because you didn't really fail a 7G, like you min ran it.
Yeah.
Did you harness it? Yeah, I guess, I'm going to answer the question now. You harnessed it in the way, like, I have to get you figured out that to tolerate G's better, building more muscle is better.
Yeah.
Because building more muscle allows you to constrict and push blood, or prevent blood from draining from upper extremities down. And you could circulate that around. And even in working out, diaphragms or muscles and breathing technique is very key for anti-G strain maneuver.
Yeah.
And not panicking. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Agreed.
Are you a roller coaster person?
Yes.
So you love roller coasters?
I did. I didn't like him at first until I was about 17. And then I said, if I'm going to fly, I need to get on some roller coasters to see if I really like this, because roller coasters, the over the top for me just didn't seem really fun.
Yeah.
But then once I did it, I was like, why did I wait? Like, I just like go to town. And even now, we just went to Universal. My son does not like roller coasters. And he was like, he didn't want to do any roller coaster rides. So he would look at me like I was disappointed. I'm like, bro, I didn't do roller coasters till I was 17. He goes, really? He's like, okay, I got 5 years. I'm like,
Yeah.
you take your time. But my daughter, adrenaline junkie. We
Yeah.
did the Velociraptor.
Yeah.
That was dope. She did it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like doing a corkscrew over the water.
No, thank you.
No, really?
I hate roller coasters.
What?
Yeah, I think they're a dumb way to die. I don't know. I just never liked it. And the other thing that how I am terrified of heights, and a lot of pilots actually are afraid of heights. Well, ask away.
You're afraid of standing over something looking down?
I'm afraid of falling off of something. Probably. I don't feel that way in the jet, but you know, like a glass elevator that you go up really high.
I love that feeling. I like that feeling. Like gets long and you're like, oh crap, and then you're like, calm down. You're just like,
no,
it'll be okay. No.
Have you ever seen like the videos of like tourists on the Grand Canyon walk on that glass thing where they're laying there screaming or crying? That would be me probably if I went to do that.
I'd go with you, and
like
I might laugh at you for a second.
Well, so that's, I guess, another thing too is that I got really good at overcoming those fears, and I could probably do it because, like, don't tell me I can't do something, but I would definitely not look down. I might close my eyes for part of it. And I had to use that overcoming fears too when I started flying for the Thunderbirds, because you're flying so close, and we are all born with this innate sense of self-preservation. And so when you're flying that close, and in my year, the boss was new and I was new as the right wing. So sometimes it's like turns would be really abrupt. And when you're flying that close, like all of a sudden you're looking at the top of an airplane. It's a really uncomfortable feeling, especially if he pulls into you, because now you're going to hit each other and you can't see each other. But you just had to fight it. So the stick of the F-16 like moves like almost nothing. It's like
the stick is here.
Yeah, it's over on the right side.
Yeah, right side.
Yeah, the throttle's on the left, the stick's on the right, and we kind of set the throttle really light so that moves like, you know, pretty gently. But the stick was like trim, full nose forward. So you're pulling back like, I don't know, 10 to 30 pounds, depending on where you're at, but the stick doesn't move hardly at all.
Isn't it amazing how guys would create something that requires a force right here at the...
Yeah, it's... And I mean, when we were flying on the team too, we joke like this arm looked like Popeye and this one looked like olive oil.
Did you ever see the Quagmire episode?
No.
When Peter Griffin told Quagmire that the internet had porn?
No.
and he gets out and he goes, Peter's like, where's the mailbox? He's like, he puts his hand out this big. He's like, that way. Yeah. So I'm like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course someone would create a system where...
We're good.
We create a system where the stick is here and you're just doing this all day.
Well, and it was like always just like varying amounts of backstick pressure. But they would film us in high definition, and there's like stripes on the wings. So your wings are pretty close, and you could tell if the stripes were off from each other, especially when you hit pause. So we'd go out there, and I'm flying, learning how to fly in formation, you know, learning how the boss is learning and learning to trust him. And I am subconsciously self-preservation. So I'm like a little bit like eking away from the formation. And consciously, I'm like, I need to be in there. I need to be tight. I need to be in position. So I'm like pushing my left rudder pedal in. And so when it came time to look at the, it's like, yeah, you can just see like these nice stripes right there. And I was just like, ugh, a little bit like that. So that was like something too. I had to overcome it. And, you know, like there's a lot of uncomfortable things that you have to go through in life, you know, like, I mean, I can't imagine like, you know, children break bones and you have to be the tough one and you have to, you know, going to the hospital, you know, God forbid, like really, really bad things. But it kind of taught me that about life too. Just if you really want something and you're really uncomfortable and you push through something that's really difficult, like there is a reward at the end and you can overcome your fears too.
Absolutely. So the U-2. The U-2 is an uncomfortable aircraft in the pattern. Like she likes to fly 45,000 feet. Sorry, my stomach. She likes 45,000 feet, flies like a normal aircraft. But low, just very irritating. I always tell people, if you look at the cockpit inside a U-2 and someone's flying it, you see a lot of jerking movements of the yoke.
Okay.
And
It has a yoke? I
It
always
does
assume it had a stick.
No, it has a yoke.
What?
So it has a yoke because if you depressurize at altitude and the
Okay.
suit inflates, you're like this.
Uh,
So you can't grab a stick in the middle.
got it.
So it's like the Michelin Man, but to bend in the suit's next to impossible if it's fully inflated.
Wow.
So that's why there's a yoke there. So
Yeah.
it's just you just grab it. But the no flap landings in the U2 are they're dangerous because we have about a 2-degree glide slope, which
Oh,
for
wow.
most people is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But it's low,
Yeah.
so you're half mile out.
Yeah.
You're going over power lines, and the speed factor. We all need to be on speed, plus or minus, whatever,
Yeah.
4-2 knots.
Yeah.
In the U2, for every knot you're fast. With a no flap, you can float an extra 1,000 feet down the road. Oh my
gosh.
So imagine just being low, especially at Beale Air Force Base, a lot of dirt, but it's really low, uncomfortable. And you're hearing the oral tones go like stall, 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 stalls, like dee, 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 or you hit like a gust of wind hits you, and then you're in stall, and you're like, crap, I don't have enough altitude, and you want to push the nose over, and then you're 10 knots fast. You're like, crap, I'm too fast. I'm going to float another 10,000 feet down the runway. And then you're trying to pull back the nose, so you're playing this game, and it's very frustrating, I would say. But, you just kind of work it through, and they make you do that for interview flights.
Oh,
jeez. Yeah, so it's like...
So a no flap landing for your interview flight.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you actually get in the plane and see that stuff before you're like, okay, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Well, they do it so because some people get in the first time and they're like, hell no.
Yeah.
Most people don't know that there's a bicycle landing gear configuration, so you have to stall the aircraft at 2 feet. So it's not like your traditional. So the main gear needs to be 2 feet off the ground, so that's why you have the mobile giving you calls. I don't think I explained that in the beginning. So they want to see how well you can land the plane. After, 10 hours of flying or 11 whatever hours of flying, you come back. You could have a great mission and then come back and land and look like a dork, and then now you got to wait another 3 days to kind of make up for what you've done.
Speaking of looking like a dork, so I finished my Thunderbird tour. I had 1,500 hours in the F-16, and I went to work in for the Air Force, Secretary of the Air Force Legislative Liaison office for 6 months, and I was part of a fellowship. I was a legislative fellow
cool.
for Joe Donnelly from Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Democrat from Indiana back in the day, and after that was over, I had to go back to Holloman to get requalified in the F-16.
So sorry.
Yeah, and it was weird. Like, the attitudes toward me were really strange. Like, I had a simulator mission, and I had talked to the guys who'd done the sims the day before, and they kind of ran through everything like in a certain order, which is like the way we study our sheets. And I did not get things in a certain order, and I got some extra like emergencies added in, so like just made things a little bit harder on me. And normally in an F-16, you'll fly a 2-ship, like your evaluators in their own jet and you're in your own jet. And they put me in a 2-seater with the biggest creep in the squadron in my back seat. And then I had like a trim malfunction. I flew it great despite all of that stuff going on, handled it really well. And I was just kind of like, whatever. So it was just, I had these weird attitudes. I actually went into a debrief or a briefing one day, and I had this, I was a lieutenant colonel. I had this major like describing to me how to fly formation and do rejoins, and I was like, "Is mine candid camera? Like, is there?"
Did you mansplain a rejoin?
Yeah, I'm like, I just came from the Thunderbirds. He's like, "Well, it's different." I go, "Yeah, but we also flew the T-38. Like, I know how to do this. I studied. Like, I know what the formation looks like." And he just kept going on, and my classmates thought that was the funniest thing ever. But I did, there was like one day I was doing a certain type of mission where it's like you're flying in a 2-ship against like another 2-ship, and it's like air combat maneuvering. And so you're trying to do tactics so that you can get through a visual engagement when you shoot like the other guy. And so you're like, one of the two formations will merge and they'll start flying. And it's hard when it's two F-16s, so you have to keep track of who's who.
Mhm.
And we would put like an orange pod on one of the wings sometimes to help, but they weren't always available. And it's better when you're doing it dissimilar against, like an eagle or a hornet or whatever, because then you can tell, who you're shooting at. But I had, I knew who my flight lead was, and we did this merge. And I had a helmet-mounted cueing system, and I locked him, and I shot him. And my radar had transitioned back from the bad guy to the good guy. So I, killed my...
Oh, you killed your...
Fraternization, killed my flight lead. And I was like, oh. So again, here I am, this, Thunderbird, the only chick going through training. Told this guy to stop telling me how to fly formation because I knew what I was doing. And then I accidentally...
Blue on blue.
Yep. Killed my own good guy. So I did, my penance for that was Gentleman Jack, the biggest bottle that you can find.
Yes.
And then I wrote a poem in Sharpie on the back of it about how I accidentally shot him down. So that was what I did. But, I never made that mistake again after that. And I never made it before in 1,500 hours of flying. But it stinks. But I guess, the perspective is no matter how far you are in training or what you're doing, you can always make mistakes. And you just have to own up to it and address it face to face. You don't have to pretend like it didn't happen or be embarrassed about it.
Oh, you could be embarrassed.
Yeah, it was embarrassing.
Flying helicopters, back of the boat, second deployment. I'm an aircraft commander with a 2P, and we're doing some training stuff.
What's a 2P?
Oh, helicopter second pilot.
Okay.
So they're the new ones.
Okay.
They're qualified in the aircraft, but they're upgrading the aircraft command. Okay. I don't remember if I was with the female I was mentoring or with. Anyway, the H-60 had a warning that at certain sun angles, 45 degrees and the sun's coming up, can trip the firelight.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So we were flying, and the sun was overhead. It was afternoon. Firelight comes on. And I'm like, well, that sucks. So, firelights, if anything unusual, secondary indication, smoke, anything, nothing. But it was still there. And I'm like, it could be the sun, but the sun's here. It's not here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what if this is real?
Yeah.
Could be. So I pull the fireballs. Wasn't. Got back. Maintenance was pissed.
Yeah.
They were so mad at me. I felt really bad. I was like, look, I wanted to be safe than sorry. But I got hell a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, the sun was more than 45 degrees. I promise you. And still got it. But a friend of mine, he had a farewell party. He was leaving. Eric Cranford, good friend of mine, died 9/11. And he was giving, usually we have a hail and farewell party. So he was farewelling. He was giving people different gifts, and he was a mentor. He was a friend of mine and kind of helped me out when I first started in squadron. And he was like, oh, I got a gift for you, Merrill. You're an awesome pilot, but you and the firelights have a problem. So he gave me this video game, and the title of it was called Fire. And so, people laugh, but it was always humbling because I was like, dang, you could always make those mistakes, like you said. But in the Navy, they usually, they make fun of you. You get a call sign.
Yeah.
The Air Force, you make mistakes like that. Sometimes, especially as I got older, it seemed like they wanted to cancel you pretty quickly.
Yeah.
The Navy, I've seen people do some crazy stuff like drop a sonobuoy by accident, but then drop a torpedo.
Oops.
Yeah. So, make fun of them a lot. But yeah,
Yeah.
my stupid human trick was pulling fire bottles. So
Yeah.
no call sign though, thank goodness.
Yeah. So that reminded me of a check ride that I had, and I was still flying the T-38, and I was acting chief of check section, which was a big deal, as that was my first assignment. And the guy was an A-10 pilot who had been running it, and he was deployed overseas for 6 months. So I was this brand new baby captain, and I had like these like reserve lieutenant colonel and a major and these other captains that were under, I was their leader in this check section, and it's our job to make sure all the students are passing and meeting standards.
Yes.
And I got tagged for a no notice check ride with someone who kind of had a little bit of a issue because he had wanted to stay on and be the squadron commander, and he didn't. And anyway, so this was another one of those things where everyone else did the 2 guys before me stayed and did all of their approaches at Del Rio Air Force Base, and he was like, no, we're gonna have you go to,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, you're gonna have to go to San Angelo, and then there's like a fix, and it was like a very complicated approach, and you had to cross 2 navaids, and the runway was shorter than it's supposed to be, but we had a waiver and agreement so that we could land on it shorter. And then one direction there was actually power lines that you had to go over, so you had to be held higher, so you had to like not duck under and swap ends, and there was like a 10-knot crosswind, and I nailed that. Like, I did everything amazing. We came back, and actually before we left, we'd done the walk around. I was like, hey, these tires don't look great, and he's like, oh, they'll be fine, right? So we go, I do 10-knot crosswind landing there. Come back, I do a no flap landing.
In a T-38.
In a T-38, which those tires.
I know. That's why. Yeah. Keep going.
Big time. It's like nothing, right? You can grease it on, you're going to be like showing cords. Yeah. And you can see like red cords. So, I was nowhere near having it pop, but I came back and I did a no flap landing, and there was a student in front of me that was supposed to clear cold, and he hadn't. He was a solo student. So my landing was a little bit goofy because I was just in the back seat of a T-38. Like, one of my instructors said, you can't see anything. He said, I feel for the runway with my butt cheeks because you can't see. You're looking out the side.
Facts. Yeah, facts. So yeah, you can't.
So, I'm like, ugh. So I was a little bit off, but again, it was like max crosswind limit 2 back there. And then as, we were like low on gas, it's like, all right, this can be full stop. He's like, no, we got gas. I got it. And my check pilot wanted to do a landing, and he comes around and he flares so freaking high. I took the plane from him. And then we come back around and yes, I thought we were going to like stall out. We were going to have like a really hard landing.
No, did he do it high?
No, this was just him because he hadn't flown in a while, and he was just going to do a landing. So I take the plane, we don't touch down, we go around, I full stop, we taxi in, and I go to the debrief, and he just like disappears down the hallway for, I don't know, 20 minutes. I was like, what the heck's going on? And comes in, and we had red corded. Mm-hmm. So you have certain numbers of these cords, and they're white, and then when you get down to where you have to change a tire, then it turns red. And we had just like a little pop of a red cord, and he ended up downgrading me for excessive side loads and tire wear when it had been bad in the beginning. But
for context of this, 10-knot crosswind in a 38 when you're doing landings, that's, I'm not gonna say significant where you're not going to be able to land the aircraft, but it could be slightly challenging, and you got to make sure.
Yeah.
Well,
it's definitely hard on the tires
too, because you're not putting cross controls in. You land and it straightens out. So really, he did that. But he's a Dremel.
The really good lesson that I learned about this is, the second in command, the director of operations, after the debrief, and it was just like weird. Like, you don't have any leg to stand on to fight with these, disagree. Yeah. He had said that my squadron commander almost got in a fist fight with my Czech pilot over it. And at the end of the day, he basically put his arm around my shoulder, literally, and walked me out of the squadron and told me about a time when he had a really hard time on a Czech ride and kind of how it had helped. And then my squadron commander made sure that he believed in me, and he stayed with me, flew with me. He made sure I needed to do like one more flight. He sent me up with the ops group commander, because he knew I was awesome and he wanted to show him. And so it was a good learning lesson. It was like really embarrassing. I'm like, well, now I'm the acting chief of Czech section. I need a remedial ride before I can go and fly again. So it was like utterly ridiculous. But all of that kind of just, it fell to the wayside for having a good leader kind of show me like, hey, and I never really failed anything else, even though I felt like people set me up for failure more than once,
Yes.
but it was a good lesson for me, and and especially when I had other students and people that work for me, and doing something sub what is your best, whether you were set up or not, like that is really tough, but it's nothing to like be ashamed of, and something definitely to grow from.
Yes. So T-38, remember in the last discussion I said during a time for leadership when I wasn't taking care of myself and I was doing my 4-ship upgrade and doing stuff, struggling in that. It came time for a check ride, and the guy that I flew with, we had known each other. We had flown T6s together. And what'd you say? Okay, sorry. So we had flown T6s together. We were T6 instructors. And for this particular one, I felt like I was going to do well on my check ride. And so I did. And I had an average flight. 4-ship, average flight. I landed. I was like, yeah, this is average. Like straight average. I mean, I've worked in standing Val. I've done numerous check rides in other planes. I'm like, okay. So we'll fast forward about 2 years. And one day my friend and I we're having lunch. We're meeting up. We're both retired. And we're talking about it. He goes, I said, yeah, that time. I said, remember you gave me that check ride? I was going through a lot of stuff. He's like, I was supposed to fail you that check ride.
What?
And I said, what? He's like, yeah, I was supposed to fail you. And I said, why? And he's like, I don't know. But I was told by the Standy Val pilot that when you fly with Meryl today, you will hook her on the check ride. And he's like, dude, no. Yeah. He's like, I haven't flown with her. So let me go fly with her and see what happens. And so I don't, to speculate, we tried to figure out why it was, and he was kind of reluctant to tell me the rest of the story of why, but there was some political stuff going on.
Yeah.
And the fact that I was going to a command job and that someone else wanted that command job. And it would have been, if I had been delayed in my going there, maybe they would have picked someone else. And, I was pretty hot about that.
Yeah.
I was, even years later, because I was like, why would that person try to set me up? Why would that person try to do something maliciously when I haven't done anything? Yeah. And I'm struggling.
But also not just grade you to your performance, like everyone else.
Like everyone else.
Yeah.
And this was a person that I considered who was in charge of standing Val, so standard in evaluations. This was a person that I had also flown T6s with. So, looking into that, he was going through some personal issues too, but I was like, man, I am not the target of your whatever frustration. Yeah. And those things do happen. And it was disappointing to hear about that, but I'm glad it didn't work out. I'm glad, my friend, you do have people who walk with integrity and do things. Yeah. Had that delayed me, I don't know what the ramifications would have been. Yeah. But I still haven't had a discussion with that Standing Val pilot. I haven't seen him in many years. He flies for the airlines now. I can't wait till we have a discussion together.
I had a similar issue, and I actually ran into this person in my corporate job later, and everything was during COVID, so everything was over the phone, so I didn't really call him out, but I had it was when I was flying at Hill, and most of the airplanes were going through an upgrade that were left behind. There were a third of the F-16s were deployed to Iraq, and there were tons of pilots and not a lot of airplanes, and I had a ride, and I am like an over-preparer, and like I believe, like especially when I wasn't flying, all I had was to prepare and chair fly and think through. And I went to the simulator mission, and it was with somebody in the 4th Fighter Squadron I was going to, and there were a bunch of different things on the syllabus that I needed to do, and there was one of them that was like talking about a certain way to drop a munition. And I was like, man, I went to the vault, I studied everything, I had everything, points 1 through 9, and that number 10, I was like, I don't understand. I was like, do you have to do this, or do you do that to make sure that you employ the mission? And everything else I did great. I had one question, and I passed the simulator, and I walked over to that squadron one day, and that instructor who had the sim with me, he literally like moved, like the next day went to his next assignment. But the squadron commander came out and he's like, "Hey, Blaze, I heard you did like horrible in the sim today and you didn't know what was going on, and you really need to be prepared." And I was like, "Holy crap!" That dude took like just a shot across the bow and then
Just
bounced.
jet it out.
Yeah. I was like, man, and I, thankfully, like that squadron commander gave me a chance to talk about like if there's one thing I'm like definitely not current. I'm definitely not qualified in that, but if there's one thing that I am freaking prepared. So it was nice that he didn't say that, but who else did he say that to behind my back? And I'm day one at my new base, and I literally was like the company grade officer of the year, like in the running at my previous base, and I get there and this guy's telling people that I'm showing up unprepared. Like that's couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, there are. It's funny because there are some obstacles that are man-made that people, for whatever reason, want to see you fail.
Yeah.
And usually when you get to the root of it, it could be jealousy. It could be maybe they've done something bad that they're getting admonished for, or maybe you've taken something that they should have, they think they should have had.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that, like, I'm not gonna give you a pass. If I find out, we're gonna have a discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna take it back to the hood with you, but we're gonna have a discussion about it. And also, I want you to see my point of view. Like, if the Standing Val guy who did that to me, like, I just, like, I don't understand what the problem was, and why would you not let someone do their job? And then after the guy that I flew with passed me, he got crapped on for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's always been other things. So I think for people who are going through those things, it does happen. But you have to have a voice. You have to tell it how it is from your perspective and let people hear what you have to say. You don't have to complain about it, but just say,
Yeah.
"Hey, this is what happened. This is where it went. This is my performance. I don't understand."
Yeah.
And just let it go.
Yeah.
And then when you meet that person again,
Yeah.
regardless of how many years later,
Yeah.
"Hey, let's have a talk. Remember back in the day?"
Yeah.
I'm not saying cash him outside.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying have that
Yeah.
conversation.
So last question, about mental fortitude, like
Yes.
there's skill set and there's mindset. So what have you done to like build up your mental resiliency for you can ask each other?
Well, I'll get into it just
Yeah.
to piggyback off. I think as you get older and you find that there are people like that out there, man, the mindset is, for me, I don't go to an emotional place. Oh, let me walk that back. I do go to an emotional place, but that's in private.
Yeah.
Like, I get mad about it. I get frustrated about it. I don't understand. I will hit a punching bag. I will go work out and work it out. But then in that process, I say, okay, let's move all that aside and let's look at just the facts.
Yeah.
And say, okay, why did this happen? What did I do on this end to maybe cause this to happen? And then I go, well, what happened on the other side? Can I answer those questions?
Yeah.
And I try to take a logical approach. So I'm going to tell one more story. And I'm not saying that happened when I was a Navy lieutenant, because when I was a Navy lieutenant, I would like want to fight you. Like, I was definitely very aggressive and competitive, and I expected a lot of myself, and like I was going to call you on your stuff. This was when I was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And this was in 2024. And this was during the time where PA, Public Affairs, they wanted to do an article on me about being the first and only Black woman to fly to U2. And when they came out with that publication, the person who was in charge of Public Affairs thought she was very excited. She wanted to make it a big deal. And I was like, whatever. And I was like, And when it did, it got picked up by news outlets. And at the time, I was the Deputy Ops Group Commander. And I had switched from Deputy Ops Group Commander to the Wing IG. And that's another story in itself.
And IG is the Wing Inspector General.
Wing Inspector General.
Yeah.
So it's almost a lateral transfer.
Okay.
And so at that time in the military, you had a BlackBerry or a cell phone.
Yeah.
It was a BlackBerry, but it was usually not given to the person, at least at the wing I worked at. It was given to the job title. So I had a BlackBerry for my Deputy OG job. I moved to the Wing Inspector General and I got another BlackBerry. This BlackBerry went to the incoming Deputy OG, who was an MC-12 guy. And at that time, I was talking to PA via the BlackBerry on my personal cell phone. And so there was a text train of 4 people. Myself, public affairs officer who was a captain, a second lieutenant, and an airman. Okay. So they were working all these media stuff while I was still flying and all these things were happening. And in the meantime, I had made Colonel. A lot of things were going on. And so I was going to air on that night for something, and they sent me a message on the BlackBerry that I previously had. And the gentleman who had that BlackBerry, they said, hey, tonight you're going to be featured at 6 o'clock or whatever. And then the response came back, and they thought it was from me.
Oh, no.
The response was, I am not interested in the likes of Colonel Tengestal.
What in the world?
Please, please remove me from any other text message.
Wow.
And that was unbeknownst to me. So the next morning, I'm driving in, and the public affairs sends me a text message on my private phone and says, I don't know what the context of the answer to this, but she screenshotted the stuff and sent it to me. I look at it and I'm going, huh. Now, from my perspective as a woman of color, if someone says, I'm not interested in the likes of you.
Seriously. Yeah. What does that mean?
It's funny. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's
A
just
simple wrong number would have like sufficed, right?
Yes. Or like, hey, this is not Colonel Tengestal. This is
Yeah. Her new number is this. Yeah.
yeah, but not interested in the likes. So I was like, all right, that's weird. I go to work and I sit on it for a little bit because, there's a part of me that's irritated.
Yeah.
Like, who the hell are you? And the other part's like, nah, you gotta talk to me. So I call him up because he's sitting at my own desk. I'm like, hey, and he answers, this is Lieutenant Colonel whatever. And I said, hey, this is Merrill, because we're same rank.
Yeah.
I'm promoted. And I said, this is Merrill. Hey, there was a text message that you sent and to public affairs, and I would like to discuss that text message with you. And he's like, okay, we could do it. I said, I don't want to do it over the phone because we're on government phones. I said, can we meet in person? Can you come over to my office? He's like, no, you could come to my office.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I said, well, I don't really want to do that because I knew in the office that I used to work in, there are 3 people that work in that office, and this needed to be a private conversation. And I was like, hey, I was like, I don't want to come to your office. Can you please come up to mine's private area? He's like, nah, you could come to my office.
Wow.
And I said, all right. I said, can we meet somewhere in a neutral location, maybe at the squadron or something like that in the private office? He goes, no, you could come to my office.
Nice guy.
And I'm like, okay. I said, thank you for your time. And I hang up. So at this point, this person is now irate and angry and pissed. Because there was the way he came across, it just wasn't cool.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And so I was angry. I was upset because I was like, okay, this guy really meant what he said. Like so. And so I had to take a moment in the bathroom. Maybe I punched the stall a few times, maybe it didn't. But then I said to myself, okay, you're upset. He said something that's not quite right. Could it be racial? Could it be sexist? It doesn't matter. And I said, but what he did do is that he sent this email to subordinates.
Yes.
Which is unprofessional.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, then we will just look at it in this light. And that's it. I'm not going to worry about what I perceive, what I think,
Yeah.
what his attitude was. I'm just going to move all out of the way. And it was very difficult to do so. And I said, okay, so I'm going to go to my supervisor. And when you work in the IG, who's your supervisor?
The wing commander.
The wing commander.
Yeah.
So I went to the wing commander. Unbeknownst to this gentleman is this other lieutenant colonel. The wing commander and I, we were at Moody Air Force Base together when I was a Navy lieutenant. He was an IFF instructor. And so we knew each other. And I went to him and I presented the text messages. And him and I, we had similar backgrounds. He was a Caucasian guy, red hair, but his upbringing was similar to like someone in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And so we had more in common than people realized. And I said to him, and I showed it to him, and I said, look, at a minimum, this is unprofessional. So I'm not going to go to the other place where you and I are looking at each other right now. Because when he saw it, he got, like, I've never seen a man turn red so quickly. And I said, what he did and where he sent it to was unprofessional.
Yeah.
And I just want to address that.
Yeah.
Anything else, I'll let you handle it.
Yeah.
And he did. I left the office. I could hear him say, hey, tell this lieutenant colonel to report to my office.
Yeah.
And, he straightened it out.
You know, there's a lot of those people out there, and sometimes it's nice when they're overtly just assholes.
Yes.
Because then you know, right? And there's people
Yes.
who will kind of covertly work against you. And I think like one of the big things that we both had to learn, and this goes for if you're in a business too, I definitely had situations like this working in corporate America, but like the people who are going to mind, they don't really matter.
Right.
And the people that matter don't mind like who you are, that you're different. And then going to your colonel or going to the wing commander, like there's people out there who will promote you, who will have your back. And, you know, you didn't go there to get even to, you know, tell on dad or any of that kind of stuff. But
No.
when you try to talk to somebody and meet in a neutral place, and I mean, what total power struggle, right? He's like, I'm not reporting to her office. She can report to mine, and doesn't care that there's going to be more subordinates listening in to this conversation. You definitely could have gone there and like called him out in front of the 3 people in the office that heard, you know.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a one-on-one.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he was told also, he's like, when a colonel select tells you to come to her office, you come to her office.
Yeah.
And then he came by later. He said, hey, I just wanted to say I was sorry. And he gave me this like crap letter. And I was like, you need to leave my office right now because I'm going to put my paws on you.
Yeah.
Like I said that to him, and he just looked at me. I said, seriously, like
Yeah.
you need to leave my office.
Yeah.
Because now at that point. But you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so for every bad interaction, like, what do you think the ratio is? Because, you know, like for that check pilot who gave me a down, like a, you know, you get Q1, Q2, Q3 is like really bad. So Q2 is like, hey, you need additional training, but it's still a big slap in the face.
Right.
So for that one guy, you know, at least that day I had 2 other people that had my back.
Right.
So I think that those people, like that ratio was, I know, and hopefully it's better these days, but at least 2 out of 3 were bros or had my back or,
Oh, yeah.
you know, helped to promote me and, you know, make sure that I had a level playing field with everyone else. What do you feel like in your career
I think,
how that?
yeah, so I think for the real bad instances where someone was out to legit overtly get me, and it's been a handful.
Mhm.
There has been someone else on the other side that they were not aware of who was that protector to say, hey, we know this is happening. We can't do anything because they're in your direct chain, but we're gonna make sure, you know, in the future things will stop. This particular instance here, that gentleman retired as a lieutenant colonel.
Hmm.
And I don't know, he might have just wanted to get out after what happened. Who knows? I didn't even care at that point. I was pinning on Colonel and moving on to the Pentagon, and he was not. And even before that, you know, there were other people. There was a 2-star who reached out to me who wanted to see me stay, and who, you know, there are good people out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's probably 2-1.
Yeah.
I think it's 3-1. But you always remember the bad. You remember the bad instances. Maybe it's a stronger feeling than it is with the good stuff. But yeah.
Well, and the really tough part is like the bro next to you in class like never had to deal with that.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of other people who weren't different than the standard Air Force pilot that maybe didn't have to deal with that. But I think like my resilience through that has just come from, you know, trying to remember the Bodine and the Snapper and the Mule and, you know, Shaggy and all of those guys who really made sure that they took care of those things for us. And
yes,
I don't know. I guess if I had one word of advice for people out there who are in a situation where maybe there's, and it doesn't even have to be diverse people, but someone in their team that's being put down, like just speak up. If someone's saying, yeah, we're going to bust her on her check ride, like call them out. Like, why would you hook somebody on a check ride that they haven't even flown yet? Or, you know, like that's not fair to say that about her. Like, why do you just really call people out? When people used to say like inappropriate, like innuendo things to me that really bothered me, I'd just stop and go, I don't get it. What do you mean? And watch their face turn red. And like, I'll let you explain that really graphic thing you just said to me. Yeah, just why don't just, you know, give me the anatomical facts for what you just said, and just to call them out on it. They think they can say something in passing and like let it go and make me feel uncomfortable. I'm going to make you feel 10 times more uncomfortable.
Yes. Yes. So if someone said something that was inappropriate, I'd be like, say less.
Yeah.
Just throw the hat in, and they're like, why would you say that? Or, but we'll talk about it next time with we'll talk about it next time. But no, I think the fact that there were other people out there for us made me want to be that person for someone else later on. Like, it didn't matter to me. Like, I'm not the person. I'm not looking at gender, ethnicity, or anything. I'm just looking at the person who seems like they're the underdog. And if they are, and, you know, hey, I'm here to talk to you. I'm here to hear what you have to say and give you some advice and help you.